I won't let them take you.
Thank you.
This thing comes off now.
Her father looked her in the eyes, handed the chain to a stranger, and walked away without saying a word. She was 17. She had done nothing wrong, and the man holding her chain was not even from her world. That moment, that single, quiet, devastating moment, changed everything. Not just for her, for the entire relationship between humanity and the Velhari people. And if you think this is just a love story, you are going to be surprised. Because what Marcus Hale did on that auction floor was either the bravest thing a human being has ever done in deep space, or the most reckless. Depending on who you ask, the Velhari will tell you it was both. Let me take you to a world called Valeth. It orbits a dim orange star about 40 light years from Earth, and it is, by every measurable standard, breathtaking. Violet forests, rivers that run copper gold in the sunset, 3 moons that rise together on the longest nights of the year. The Velhari who live there are tall, silver-skinned, and ancient in the way that civilizations get when they have been making the same mistakes for 10,000 years. They build beautiful things, and they have terrible customs. That combination is more common in the galaxy than most people want to admit. The Velhari are not monsters. That is important to understand from the start. They do not wake up wanting to cause suffering. They have poets and philosophers and a funeral rite so moving that human anthropologists have cried watching it. But they also have a debt system, a practice called Velkathos. That is, by any translation, slavery. When a family falls into financial ruin, the eldest unmarried daughter becomes collateral. The fathers decide. The daughters do not get a vote. It has been this way for centuries, and the Velhari are not in the habit of questioning things that have been true for centuries. Kael'tha Sora was not supposed to be in that position. Her father, Drevath Sora, was a merchant, mid-level, respected, known in 3 port cities along the western shelf of the main continent. He traded mineral compounds and atmospheric processors and had, for most of Kael'tha's childhood, done reasonably well. She grew up with books, with music. Her mother taught her to navigate star charts by hand, the old Velhari way, before she died of a lung sickness when Kael'tha was 11. She was smart, adaptable, and she spoke 4 languages, including, and this matters, basic standard human, which she had taught herself from a translation module she bought second-hand at a market stall when she was 14. She thought it was beautiful. The sharp consonants, the way humans compressed enormous emotion into very short sentences. She practiced in her room at night, whispering to herself, not knowing that language would one day be the only thing standing between her and a life she could not come back from. Drevath's business collapsed when Kael'tha was 16. Not slowly, not in the way businesses usually die with warning signs and opportunities to pivot. It collapsed overnight. When a trading partner he had trusted for 12 years turned out to have been running a fraud operation that spanned 6 star systems. When the Galactic Trade Authority swept in and froze assets, Drevath lost everything simultaneously: his warehouse stock, his transport contracts, his operating line of credit, and the 2 ships he had leased but not yet paid off. He was left with a house, a daughter, and a debt figure that would take a normal man 4 lifetimes to repay. He did not tell Kael'tha what he had decided until the morning it happened. She came downstairs to find 2 men she did not know standing in the front room, and her father holding a document with his signature already on it. He told her that the debt had been restructured. He told her it was temporary. He said the word temporary twice, and she understood immediately that he was saying it for himself, not for her, She asked him to look at her. He looked at the floor instead. She did not cry in front of the men. She saved that for later. She was taken to a processing center in the port city of Rethvar, given a gray garment and a registration tag, and placed in a holding area with 11 other women ranging in age from 16 to 30. Some of them had been there for weeks. The ones who had been there the longest had stopped talking. Kyeltha talked to all of them because it was the only thing she knew how to do when she was terrified. She made a mental map of the facility. She noted the shift changes of the guards, the times when the food came, the window in the eastern wall that let in real light twice a day. She was not planning an escape. She was just refusing to stop being a person. The auction at Rethvar was held on the third day of the Velkathos quarter, which under Velhari law was the only time such transactions were legally permitted. It was semi-public, meaning merchants, traders, and registered buyers from off-world were permitted to attend. The Velhari had opened their debt markets to outside investors about 40 years prior as part of a broader economic treaty with the Galactic Commerce Collective. And the result was an uncomfortable but functioning arrangement where aliens sometimes sat in the buying gallery alongside Velhari merchants. Most off-world buyers were there for labor contracts. Skilled workers, technical specialists. The Velhari would argue this was different from what it looked like. Most of the galaxy would argue it was not. Marcus Hale had not planned to be in Rethvar at all. He was 31, a cargo broker working independent routes through the outer spiral, the kind of man who preferred the company of his navigation AI to most people he had met in person. He was not particularly idealistic. He had seen enough of how the galaxy worked to have lost the naive version of his politics a long time ago. He paid his port fees on time, filed his manifests correctly, and kept his opinions to himself in foreign markets because that was how you stayed in business. He had a small scar over his left eyebrow from a docking dispute on a station he no longer visited. He drank coffee, actual earth-grown coffee, which cost an embarrassing amount this far out. And he listened to old jazz recordings when he was doing jump calculations. He was, by most definitions, unremarkable. He had stopped in Rethvar to offload a partial cargo of water filtration components. A last-minute diversion, after his original delivery contact on another world, had canceled. The port agent who cleared his paperwork mentioned the auction as a curiosity, the way port agents sometimes mention local things to off-worlders who look bored. Marcus nodded, said maybe, and then went back to his ship. He sat in the cockpit for a while. He drank half a cup of coffee. He looked at his manifest. He looked out the viewport at the copper-gold light on the city's skyline. Then he put the coffee down, picked up his credit chip, and went to the auction hall. He would spend the rest of his life being unable to explain exactly why. The hall was large, cooler than the outside air, with tiered seating that put buyers above the floor-level platform. The Velhari buyers were dressed in the formal deep blue of merchant class. The handful of off-worlders sat in a separate section on the left. Marcus took a seat near the back and watched. The first 3 transactions happened quickly. In the clipped formal Velhari of legal proceedings, labor contracts mostly, the buyers nodding, the women on the platform standing with their faces set to expressions that were not quite blankness and not quite dignity, but somewhere in between. Then Kyeltha was brought out. And something changed in the room, though Marcus could not have said exactly what or why. She was tall, silver-skinned like all Velhari, with dark markings along her jaw and collarbone that indicated high intelligence lineage in their culture. Marcus did not know that yet, but he would learn it later. She stood on the platform with her hands loose at her sides and looked at the room with the specific kind of attention that people have when they are memorizing everything, because they do not know what they will need to know later. She was not performing strength. She was actually strong. It was a different thing entirely, and Marcus recognized it the way you recognize something you have seen before without being able to name it. The bidding began. A merchant in the front row placed the first number. 2 others followed. Marcus sat very still. He did not move until the bidding had narrowed to 2 Velhari buyers in the 3rd row, and then he raised his credit chip and set a number in standard that was 40% above what anyone else had offered. The room went quiet, in a way that rooms only go quiet when something has happened that no one prepared for. The auctioneer looked at him. The Velhari buyers turned. Kael'tha on the platform turned. Their eyes met for the first time. She did not look relieved. She looked exactly the way someone looks when they are trying to determine whether a new danger is greater or lesser than the old one. Marcus did not look away. He said, in the clearest standard he could manage, 3 words that were not part of any legal proceeding and that he had not planned to say. She goes free. What followed was not simple. Nothing that mattered in Marcus Hale's life was ever simple. The transaction was technically legal. The Galactic Commerce Collective's treaty with Valith permitted registered buyers to purchase a Velkathos contract and then formally dissolve it under what was called a humanitarian release clause. It was a clause that existed mostly on paper. Almost no one had ever used it. The Velhari legal officials in the room were not immediately certain of the procedure. There was a 40-minute delay while documents were located and authenticated. Marcus stood near the edge of the buying floor, drank the complimentary mineral water because he had nothing else to do with his hands, and waited. Kael'tha was brought to a side room to wait as well. A Velhari official explained to her, in formal Velhari, that her contract had been purchased by a human male and was being released under the humanitarian clause. This meant she was legally free. She would be given papers. The official said this with the tone of someone reading from a procedure manual, which is exactly what was happening. Kael'tha sat with her hands folded in her lap and said nothing until the official left. And then she said, very quietly, in standard, "Why?" She was not asking the official. She was asking the room. She was asking the ceiling. She was asking the universe the specific and unanswerable question of why any of this had happened to her. And also, already, why a human stranger had spent an enormous amount of money to set her free. When Marcus was allowed into the room to complete the paperwork, she was standing by the window. She turned when the door opened. He sat down at the table, began filling out the release forms, and said, without looking up, "You speak standard." It was not a question. He had heard her speaking it to herself as he entered the hallway. She said, "Yes." Then, "You spent a great deal of credits." He said, "I know." She said, "I want to understand why." He looked up from the form. He thought about it honestly for a few seconds, which she noticed. He said, "I sat in the back of that room for about 20 minutes before the bidding started, and I watched people get sold. And I kept thinking, I have the money, I have the clause, and the only reason not to use it is that it would be inconvenient. And I don't think inconvenience is a good enough reason." He paused. "That's all it was. I'm sorry it's not more dramatic." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "It is more dramatic than you think. Most people have convenient reasons." He signed the form. She was free, held legally, completely, irreversibly free. She could walk out of that room in any direction she chose. She chose the direction he was walking. She did not move in with him romantically, not at first, not for a long time. Let's be clear about that, because the story is better when it's true. What actually happened is that she had nowhere to go. Her father's house existed, but she had no desire to return to it, and she had no money, and her papers were 40 minutes old. Marcus had a ship. He offered her passage, clarifying carefully and directly that it was passage, not obligation, not debt, not a different version of what she had just been freed from. She could go wherever she wanted. He would drop her anywhere in the quadrant. She asked where he was going. He said his next delivery was to a station called Kel Mora, about 6 days out. She said she would go to Kel Mora then. He said, "All right." She said, "I will work for the passage." He started to say it was not necessary. She cut him off with a look that made it clear the conversation was over, because she was not going to ride 6 days in a man's ship without contributing, not because of pride, though there was some of that too, but because she understood at a cellular level that the best protection against dependency was to be useful. She had understood that since she was 11 years old. 6 days in a small cargo ship with one other person is either a disaster or a beginning, and it depends almost entirely on whether both people are honest. Marcus and Kyotha were both, by nature and by history, honest people. Not always comfortable honest, the real kind. On the second day, she asked him what humans thought of the Velkathos system, and he told her the truth. Most humans didn't think about it at all, because Vailith was far away, and humans were very good at not thinking about things that were far away. She said that was true of most species. On the third day, he asked her about her father, and she answered him in full, without softening any of it. And he listened without trying to fix it or explain it, which was the right thing to do. On the fourth day, they were both quiet, which was also fine. She was a better navigator than him. This became apparent on the fifth day, when she glanced at his jump calculation, said nothing for a moment, then said very carefully, "Your entry angle is going to be about 3 degrees off, and you will lose 4 hours." He double-checked. She was right. He adjusted the angle, they saved the 4 hours, and he told her she should have been a navigator. She told him she had been planning to be, before her life went sideways. He said it wasn't too late. She didn't say anything to that, but she thought about it for a long time. Kel Mora Station was loud and large and smelled like recycled air and engine coolant, the way all big stations do. Kyotha stood on the docking level with her papers in her hand and looked at the departure boards. Marcus stood next to her and did not tell her what to do, which was, she was beginning to understand, his particular gift, the ability to simply not impose. She asked him where he was going after Kel Mora. He told her. She looked at the departure boards for another minute. Then she said, "I could help with navigation, if you need it." He said, "I do actually need it." She said, "I want 30% of the delivery fee." He said, 25, but you also get room and board, and I won't complain about your choice of music." She said, "You don't know my choice of music yet." He said, "I'm willing to risk it." She smiled for the first time. It was small and brief, and she looked away quickly after, but he saw it. He counted it. The next 8 months were a working partnership. They ran cargo across 4 systems. She took her navigation certification at a testing station in the Arathi Belt and passed with the second highest score recorded that quarter. He told everyone they met that she was the best navigator he had ever worked with. And he said it with no hesitation and no qualifier. And she cataloged every instance because she was not yet used to being valued in a way that had no price tag attached. They got into 2 arguments that mattered. The first was about her father. Marcus had expressed an opinion, carefully, briefly, and she had told him it was not his opinion to have. He had agreed, immediately and without defending himself, and the argument had ended. The second was about a job offer she received from a larger shipping consortium that would have paid her 3 times what she was making. She almost took it. She sat with the offer for 2 days. She did not take it. She told him she had decided against it. He asked why. She said, "Because this works." Neither of them made a big moment out of that, which is probably why it stayed true. The first time he told her that he loved her, they were in the middle of a debris field navigation pass that required 90% of her concentration. And he did it because he had apparently decided that the right moment was whenever the thing became true, not whenever it was convenient. She said nothing for 4 minutes because she was working. When the ship was clear, she set the autopilot, turned her chair to face him and said, "Say that again when I can look at you properly." He said it again. She looked at him for a long time. That long, measuring look she had given him on the auction platform. The one that was calculating whether the danger was real or manageable. Then she said, "In Velhari," the word that does not translate exactly into standard, but means something close to. "I see you, and I am choosing to be seen." He did not know enough Velhari to know what she had said. She translated it later. He thought about it for 3 days. They were married on Kelmora Station, 11 months after they met. The ceremony was small. 2 witnesses, a station registrar, a window that looked out at the stars. She wore deep blue, which in Velhari tradition was the color of a person who had navigated their own course. He wore his least damaged jacket. The registrar, a 4-armed Karavian woman who had performed 11,000 weddings, said she had never seen a couple fill out the pre-ceremony paperwork so efficiently. Kael'tha said that was because they were both very practical. Marcus said that was the kindest thing anyone had ever said about him. Her father heard about the marriage 6 months later through a trading network gossip channel, the way most Velhari merchants heard about anything. He sent a brief message. It was neither an apology nor a congratulation. It was something in between, a Velhari form of acknowledgement that technically carried ceremonial weight, even when the person sending it had no remaining moral authority. Kael'tha read it once. She archived it. She did not respond. She decided that was enough. The part of this story that spread across 4 star systems, the part that started appearing in GCC cultural briefings and was eventually cited in a Galactic Senate discussion about the Vel-Cathos Treaty, was not the marriage. It was what Marcus did 8 months after the wedding, when a junior Velhari official tried to reclassify Kael'tha's status as non-permanent release on a legal technicality that had been quietly introduced into Velith's commercial code. Someone had found a loophole. Someone was trying to use it. The paperwork suggested that her freedom was conditional on residency outside Velhari space, and since their last cargo run had taken them through Velhari-controlled territory, there was an argument, a bad faith argument, but a legal one, that her release was now void. Marcus Hale, cargo broker, unremarkable, quiet, preferring the company of his navigation AI to most people, went to war. Not the violent kind, the kind that is, in some ways, harder. He hired a galactic commerce attorney. He filed 17 separate injunctions across 4 jurisdictions. He spent every credit they had saved in 11 months of cargo runs. He appeared via comms at a GCC arbitration panel and spoke for 22 minutes in calm, detailed, documented standard about why the clause that had freed his wife was valid, permanent, and not subject to retroactive reclassification. He did not raise his voice. He was not dramatic. He was simply immovable, the way some people get when the thing being threatened is the thing they are most certain about. The arbitration ruled in their favor. The technicality was closed permanently. and the ruling included a 4-page precedent statement that effectively locked the humanitarian release clause into galactic commerce hard law, meaning it could never again be reduced to fine print. Kael'tha read the ruling on the day it was filed. She sat with it for a long time. She already knew what kind of man Marcus was. She had known since the 5th day on the ship when he listened without trying to fix anything. But this was a different kind of knowing. This was evidence, filed in triplicate, registered across 4 systems, stamped by 3 arbitration bodies. This was a man who had taken the one thing he was most certain about and turned it into a document that would protect other people too. That was not something she had a word for in Standard or Velhari. She made up one. She told him the word later that night. He asked what it meant. She said it meant the specific kind of person who turns love into a law. He was quiet for a while. He said, "That's a very long definition for one word." She said, "We Velhari have a lot of long words." He said, "I know. I'm still learning them." She said, "You have time." He said, "I know." They ran cargo for another 9 years. She got her senior navigation license. He let her name the ship, which she called Velmora, which in Velhari meant approximately the course no one told you to take. They went back to Violet twice, once for business, once because she wanted to see the 3 moons rise together one more time, the way she had seen them as a child before everything got complicated. Standing on the copper soil hill outside Rethvar, watching the 3 moons stack themselves above the violet tree line, she thought about the girl who had stood in that auction hall, not knowing what direction to walk. She thought about how the only language available to that girl had been one she had learned by herself, in the dark, from a second-hand translation module, whispering to herself because she thought it was beautiful. The universe is a very large place, and most of what happens in it is neither fair nor unfair. It is simply indifferent. The Velcathos system did not end because of one man with a credit chip and a humanitarian clause. It ended slowly over the following 20 years, under mounting galactic Senate pressure, because enough cases got documented, enough precedents got set, and enough people decided that indifference was no longer a position they could afford. Marcus and Kael'tha were 2 of the 47 people formally credited in the GCC Valeth Reform Registry for contributing to that end. They were listed alphabetically. Kael'tha Hala. She had taken his name, combined it with her own, dropped the double L in the Velhari pronunciation. Was listed between 2 people she had never met. And she thought that was probably the right way for something like that to work. Change does not belong to any one person. It belongs to everyone who refused to accept that inconvenience was a good enough reason. She kept the translation module. The second-hand one, cracked casing and all. It sat on a shelf above the navigation console of the Velmora for the rest of the time they flew together. Sometimes passengers would ask what it was. She would tell them it was the reason she was alive. They usually assumed she meant it metaphorically. She never corrected them, because whether it was metaphor or fact depended on how you thought about time. And she had always believed that time was less linear than most species claimed. The man who held the chain walked away. The man who held the credit chip stayed. That is the whole story, and also only the beginning of it. And if you know anyone who needs to hear it, anyone standing at the edge of a decision that seems too expensive, too inconvenient, too dramatic for an ordinary person to make, send this to them. Because Marcus Hale was ordinary. That was the entire point. He was ordinary, and he chose anyway. And sometimes that is the only difference the universe requires.